Hi, my name is Ekta Kaul. I am an artist and I work with place as my inspiration. Um, all of the works that you will see in this exhibition, which is called Mapping Memories, is an exploration of place, memory, belonging, and my personal history. So let me begin with this one. This piece is really dear to me. It's part of a series where I'm exploring the idea of home. This is a map of London, or rather an abstraction of a map of London, and you can see the Thames here. But I'm really playing here with mark making, which is something I love and enjoy very much in my work. And all of these fragments of cloth are salvaged from my studio. So there are parts of other projects, there are things that I've collected and bought over the years, and really kind of building up layers and also kind of alluding to the idea of memory being like a patchwork almost. And there is silk and corduroy linen, which I use primarily in my work, linen a whole lot, and cotton to a lesser degree. So the next one, this map is an abstraction of a map of Delhi, and those of you who are familiar with Delhi might recognize the kind of very angular New Delhi kind of roundabouts and straight streets, which by the way was designed by a British architect by the name of Lutyens. And there are many memories in these streets that are meaningful to me. And there are pieces which have been dyed using indigo, but there are different number of dips. So you see from a very pale blue to a medium blue to a very deep indigo blue. And to contrast that off, I've used cream thread, but in different thicknesses. Again, I was playing with creating contrast within the mark making. So something that's an intensely embroidered area and very, very thick thread contrasts beautifully with, you know, just a single strand and very, very, very tiny marks. The background is built using different fragments, which I have attached using a whip stitch, which is something that I really like. So you really read it as a little mark. Often I would do them tone in tone, but in other pieces I've really played with that little mark in contrast color. So this one is based very loosely on the floor plan of my parents' home. So I'm really thinking of you know, where we would hang out as a family, but other areas also. And making this was so special and meaningful for me because I kind of revisited all of those. And you know, my mum is now gone and it's just my dad, and he doesn't live in this house anymore. So it feels like I've kind of recreated a very special period in my life through this piece. And also the thread that I've used in this is really special. It's reclaimed thread from my son's denims, so his much loved jeans, which I unraveled and stitched with, kind of, you know, adding another layer of meaning to the piece. This piece is my newest work, and it really talks about the idea of these two worlds that I seem to be straddling. There is my childhood home of India, and the UK now, where I live and work and have done for the past 18 years. And there is a connection, of course, for me, and I have embroidered, some text which sort of connects both the countries, and it says mother, mom, mother tongue, motherland, and ma, which is the Hindi word for mother, and this idea of motherland and the language that I grew up speaking. I hardly speak it now, except for home. So it's all of those feelings, and kind of sometimes the world seems so far apart from one another, but then there are other times, like when I'm stitching or I am with other people who love art and who love stitch in the same way that I do. I feel instantly connected. So I think to me, this work talks about belonging, and belonging simultaneously to two worlds, but also perhaps not belonging anywhere. And sometimes, I find myself in that liminal space of between two places. And although that is an uncomfortable space to be in, I try to sit with that discomfort. But the visual of it comes from those really old maps that showed two hemispheres, and to me that became such a beautiful way of kind of visually expressing this idea of two halves of the world, or two sides of the world, if you will. This piece is called Threads of Connection, and I was really responding to my personal quest of connecting with my maternal grandmother, who I have never met. I lost her, or rather my mother lost her when she was very young, about 9 or 10 years old. So I never really met her, but I heard of her and her many, many talents with painting and embroidery growing up. And it was always with this sense of sadness that my mother, shared those stories, obviously. So last year, whilst researching Kantha for a book that I am writing, I went to West Bengal in India and went to Kolkata, which is the capital, and which is kind of where the big museums are that house some of the really interesting Kantha pieces. So a part of my reasons of going there was also to look for my grandmother. So the family had been involved with the jute trade. This is the very few little nuggets that I knew, was that they were involved in the jute trade, and with the partition of India, the factories were left on one side of the border and the fields were on the other side. So ultimately, after the partition, I think the business fell apart and they moved to North India. But I know she did her schooling, her college there. So I was really excited about finding where they had lived, where she had schooled. But when I actually went to the city and started making enquiries, I couldn't find anything. I mean, in the intervening decades, more than 7 decades, things have changed. And the name of the street where they had lived has actually turned into one of the most commercial areas. So all my visions of these crumbling bungalows that I would discover were sadly, they just remained dreams and fantasies, and I couldn't really find any information about my grandmother. But in the process, I responded with making this map, which is kind of loosely based on a map of Kolkata, and with the Hooghly River flowing through it, and there is a blank square in the embroidery there, which is roughly the place that I know the family had lived in. So for me, that part of the puzzle is still incomplete, and I have left it blank with the hope that maybe one day I can go back in and fill it in. So this piece feels really special to me. It was part of an exhibition last year at the Somerset House in London, which was built on this idea of repair, care and mending. And the piece was commissioned by Toast, and the fabrics that I've used are all remnants from my studio and also from the Toast studio. So and it's my personal connection to my grandma, so it feels really, really personal and meaningful. So this quilt is called Terrains of Memory, and it's really playing on the idea of land, and I am really inspired by aerial photography of fields. So my ancestors were farmers and landowners, so this idea of working with the land is something that has been in the family, but I'm kind of looking at it in a more visual and tactile way. And to make this piece, I wanted to play with texture, color and shape. I mean, those are really kind of the basic elements of art making, but I thought for this one I would play with complementary colors on the color wheel. They sit on the opposite ends, and bringing them together in like little splashes would be really fun to do. So if you look at this little piece of stitched area, you know, it's tiny and you have to kind of come closer to experience it, and that speaks really well to like this bold splash of orange. And then if you zoom in, each of these pieces I've whip stitched with the same bright orange, so you don't necessarily see that, but as you come closer you start discovering it. So it's almost like, you know, when we cook and we plan flavors, so something that's bold and punchy that hits you right away, which are these big bold shapes, but then there are these subtler flavors that you come in and experience as you move closer to the piece. In the background, almost like flowing like water, are these marks, which I think accentuate that feeling of multi-layers coming together and then make allusions to land, especially when, you know, it is being sewn with grain. But here I'm kind of sewing it with a thread. And then what I really enjoyed about this piece is adding the shibori details, which again is this idea of thread resisting certain parts of the cloth. So once this thread is gone, once the stitch is gone, just the memory of that is registered on the cloth. So for me, that kind of adds another layer of meaning to the quilt, and I really enjoy it for so many reasons, but mainly because the color is just so fun to work with punchy colors. So this piece is called Story Map, and I'm really telling my story of London, which is where I live and I work, and it's really a map of the streets and parks of London, but more than that, it's really places that are dear to me, that I enjoy being at and visiting. So it's very, very monochromatic, and I've always loved that, you know, the kind of contrast between black and cream, and I wanted it to be that kind of language which only accentuates line, as opposed to playing with color, for instance. So I personally like the little fish in the Thames. And then it's mostly, you know, parks that I love visiting. There is Hyde Park, and then there's the Regent's Park, and there's Hampstead Heath up on the north, in North London. It's a very tactile piece, and I really see that hanging in spaces and kind of giving them this feeling of softness and almost the comfort of home. And the map making, this was one of the earliest pieces that I did, and making London, the map of London, really was a way of kind of acquainting myself with the city when I had newly arrived here. And now all of these years later, it feels still a very important piece, and I'm constantly doing versions of it. You know, I'm exploring the city in ever new ways. So it feels like a subject that I keep returning to over and over again, and it's just really fun to do. So I hope you've enjoyed this walkthrough of my exhibition, Mapping Memories, and I hope you've enjoyed my work. Thank you so much for watching.